No DQ Galaxy. We are live with a recap of AEW Dynamite for Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. This wasn't just any edition of Dynamite. This was a special anniversary show. 3 years since the debut of Dynamite. 3 years ago, Dynamite debuted in Washington, D.C. with a sold-out crowd, 14,000 plus people. This year, back in Washington, D.C. for the 3-year anniversary show. And, well, things are not the same. Not nearly as big of a crowd, just over 3,000 people in a much smaller arena. Also, AEW 3 years ago was the hot new thing in wrestling, the shiny new toy. Now, reports of backstage drama, fights, altercations. Just before Dynamite went on the air, a new report from TMZ that Sammy Guevara and Andrade El Idolo got into a backstage altercation. Andrade was apparently sent home, and his match on Rampage, he was going to put his AEW career on the line against 10, with 10's mask being on the line. That match is not happening now. Instead, there's going to be a 6-man tag team match, Dark Order versus Death Triangle, for the tag team titles. What is going on in the world of AEW? And Dr. Dakota Scorpio sent in a $2 super chat, says, 3 years celebration overshadowed by the drama, shaking my head, Tony Khan. It's very unfortunate because this was definitely a distraction from what should have been a very fun, positive night for AEW. They did the best they could under the circumstances. So let's get into the recap. Walter Cruz sent in a $2 super chat just to remind everyone, say yes to no DQ, like, share, hashtag stick to my shtick. Let's go ahead and get into this recap. We kicked off with MJF versus Wheeler Yuta in MJF's first match since Double or Nothing, when he was basically squashed by Wardlow. Caleb Jacobs sent in a $5.87 super chat. He says, like the Bob Dylan song says, the times they are a-changing. I appreciate that, and I'm sure Virtue will appreciate the little Bob Dylan reference. Things changing in AEW as in life. Things change. Things never stay the same. TJS not impressed with AEW at this point. Says Dynamite bores him. William Regal was out there on commentary for MJF versus Yuta. Crowd was very much into Yuta. He was strutting around, playing some mind games with MJF. They went back and forth a little bit. Yuta hit some German suplexes. MJF with a thumb to the eye, but Yuta kept the momentum going. And they kept countering each other's pinfall attempts. They kept rolling back and forth. And they took each other down. They were reversing the tombstone pile driver, double clothesline. Crowd gave them a standing ovation. They were loving this. Then MJF attempted an avalanche tombstone pile driver, but Yuta, taking a page out of his buddy Moxley's playbook, bit him, hit a Hurricane Rana. MJF flipped off Yuta, and then Yuta came off the top rope with a big splash. MJF, however, was able to kick out. Yuta hit repeated elbow strikes. MJF then countered with the Salt of the Earth submission. Yuta attempted to escape, but could not do it. MJF applied the extra pressure, and Yuta had no other choice but to tap out. And then after the match, Yuta got in MJF's face and offered a handshake. MJF, because of their history, was considering it, but before he could actually return the handshake, you had Lee Moriarty come into the ring and attack Yuta. MJF appeared to be unhappy with this, and then Stokely Hathaway handed MJF the Dynamite Diamond ring. MJF was unsure of what to do. He hesitated. Then we had William Regal stand up from the commentary booth, and he got into the ring. He pulled out the old brass knucks, and the crowd chanted, "You effed up" at MJF. MJF walked out of the ring, took his leave. So good stuff here. I liked this whole angle with MJF. They're teasing the babyface turn. I think they need to do it. I know that Jose is against it, but I'm in the turn MJF babyface camp. And yes, MJF was technically in that casino ladder match. Technically, you could say. And Mr. Yuck, I'm not even sure if they're really focusing on the ranking system at this point. All of the changes that Tony Khan had to make, I think maybe he's realizing it's too much of a headache. So good start to the show. Very good match for these guys. I liked the post-match angle. Chris Jericho was backstage with the Jericho Appreciation Society along with Sammy Guevara. Now, TMZ initially reported that both Andrade and Sammy Guevara were sent home, but clearly that was not the case. Guevara was there, and TMZ changed the story. So it appears that only Andrade was sent home, and we do know for sure his match was canceled for Rampage. We know that much. Backstage drama. We'll be talking about this more on the No DQ review, so make sure you tune in for that. I'm sure we'll have a very interesting discussion, and we'll have more information regarding the backstage altercation. But let's move on here. We had Darby Allin versus Jay Lethal. Good match here with these guys. Lethal got the upper hand, hit an avalanche dragon screw, put on the figure four, but Darby got to the rope. Darby hit a code red. Lethal kicked out of that. Lethal then regained the upper hand, but at this point, the rest of his guys, Sanjay Dutt and Satnam Singh, they came out to the stage area. Lethal told them to go to the backstage area. He did not want the help. And then Darby took advantage, applied the Last Supper pinning combination, scored the 1-2-3 victory. And then after the match was over, Darby wanted a handshake, and Jay Lethal gave him one. So they're doing a theme on this show, the Code of Honor, where they shake hands and show sportsmanship. Is this AEW's way of trying to unite the locker room and show that people respect each other? Are they trying to build up the Ring of Honor brand? Like, I feel at this point, the Ring of Honor brand may have more prestige than AEW as far as people respecting each other and that kind of thing. It's quite amusing at this point. It's sad, but it's also funny at the same time. You have to laugh at it a little bit. So I guess Jay Lethal is maybe going babyface. I don't know. Don't really care all that much, to be honest. But hey, Darby Allin picks up a win here. Good for him. Next up, we had Brian Cage versus the TNT champion, Wardlow. And this was, as Big E would put it, the big meaty men slapping meat. They traded clotheslines. Neither guy was moving much. Irresistible force meeting the immovable object, as Gorilla Monsoon might say. They traded some punches. Wardlow attempted, Wardlow caught an attempt from Brian Cage at a 619, Wardlow hit a world's strongest slam. And then Wardlow started suplexing Brian Cage around. German suplex, belly to belly. But then Brian Cage regained control. He suplexed Wardlow from the apron back into the ring, showing off the power. And then hit an F5, but Cage kicked out of that, or Wardlow kicked out of it, I should say. Wardlow avoided a power bomb attempt, and then Wardlow hit a series of headbutts. Wardlow then did the power bomb symphony. 4 power bombs, picked up the victory over Brian Cage. This was Cage's first match on Dynamite in over a year. He had a good showing, but in the end, Wardlow wins. No real surprise. After the match was over, you had these guys, I guess they're from Ring of Honor. I never saw them before tonight. They're called the Embassy. They attacked Wardlow, and then Samoa Joe ran down, got a big reaction. He made the save, but he was overwhelmed by these Ring of Honor guys. And then FTR showed up. They got a big pop, and you had the bad guys flee the ring. Good match here with Brian Cage and Wardlow. Don't know who these other guys are from Ring of Honor, but I suspect they'll get squashed here pretty soon, and that'll be that. We then had Britt Baker backstage talking about what is it? Paige, Saraya, whatever her name is these days. And Baker said that Saraya will not be wrestling in AEW because the doctors have not cleared her. Britt Baker said that they need to put Saraya in bubble wrap and send her home. And now it is Britt Baker's house. Dylan Hensley sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that, Dylan. I appreciate it. Says, I really hope AEW does more with Wardlow and Brian Cage. Well, definitely Wardlow. Brian Cage, they had something with him in 2021, and then it kind of fizzled out. I'm not really sure what you do with Brian Cage at this point because he's had the start and stop pushes. He's one of those guys that might be better off trying out with WWE again and seeing if something can happen there. Don't know what's next for Brian Cage, but Wardlow, dude should be on TV every week, and they should be pushing him to the moon. He should really be going for the world title, but hey, whatever. Remember when Wardlow said he did not want to challenge for the AEW title until the real champion was back? Well, Moxley's the real champion now. Shouldn't Wardlow be going for the title? I don't know. We had a 6-woman tag team match. Penelope Ford, Serena Deeb, and Jamie Hayter versus Willow Nightingale, Athena, and Toni Storm. Saraya was out there at ringside. Pretty decent match here with the women. Serena Deeb with a chop block to Toni Storm took control for a while, and then Willow got the hot tag. Saraya grabbed a crutch from Rebel. Rebel was trying to use a crutch, and then Willow hit Deeb with a pounce. Things started to break down, everybody hitting moves to each other. But then Willow scored the pinfall victory. She pinned Penelope with a Dr. Bomb. Willow getting a little bit of a push here, I guess. And then Britt Baker, after the match was over, got in the ring, confronted Saraya, and Saraya punched Britt Baker. And we had a brawl. They were exchanging blows, and then Saraya threw Britt Baker out of the ring. Rebel got in, and Saraya kicked Rebel down. So what does this mean? Is Saraya Paige going to wrestle again? That's the big question. Certainly seems that way. The announcers were even bringing up how maybe Britt Baker got some bad information. I mean, we'll see. she did get physical. She didn't take any bumps, but she did get physical, and one would think that she will wrestle at some point. Otherwise, why even bring her in? Then we had the big segment that we've all been waiting for this entire week. It's National Scissoring Day. We had the Acclaimed with Billy Gunn, or Daddy Ass, as they like to call him. You had Max Caster with his little rap. He made some references to politicians. They were in Washington, D.C. after all. And then we had Bowens talking about how they're the best homegrown team in AEW history. #1 selling t-shirt of 2022 in AEW, and said AEW now stands for Acclaimed every Wednesday. Bowens said he knows a thing or two about scissoring. Said it's a handshake, a sign of friendship. Then you had Billy Gunn talk for a little bit, saying that it's not Swerve's house, it's Daddy Ass's house. He had a gift for the Acclaimed, a giant pair of scissors. And then you had Max Caster talking for a bit, saying that the country, the United States, is divided. He's going to bring them together. The one thing that everybody loves is the Acclaimed, and they were going to do a final scissoring in the ring, everybody doing scissoring to unify the country. Bipartisan. But then before they could do it, we had Swerve Strickland show up. He got booed heavily, and he talked about how this was the most idiotic thing he ever saw. He said Billy Gunn was the only reason they were the champs, and he challenged Billy Gunn to a match next week in Toronto. But before Billy Gunn could answer the challenge, you had Smart Mark Sterling show up, and he said that the Acclaim needs him to beat up Swerve. He wanted to be scissored, but instead he got his ass kicked. And Bowens did scissor him, but not in a good way. Came off the top rope with the scissor, whatever. I'm not even sure what you want to call it. But yeah, he scissored him. A painful scissoring, that's for sure. And then Billy Gunn accepted the match. And then, of course, you got to give the people what they want. We had the three-way scissoring. I can't believe I'm saying this. Three-way scissoring with Billy Gunn and the Acclaimed. Segment was very entertaining, maybe a little too long. It did seem to drag a bit, but it was entertaining. It was fun. And these guys are red hot. I mean, you got all of the scissors in the crowd. Not real scissors, hopefully, but just the signs. And that's how you know something is working. Like back in the Attitude Era, if something was catching on, like the first sign that it was working, you'd see all the signs in the crowd. And you look on Dynamite, you had tons of Acclaimed signs and scissors and all that. So yeah, these guys are red hot right now. And as Bowens said, it should be Acclaimed every Wednesday. Any act that's hot should be on TV every week. That includes Wardlow, FTR, and the Acclaim. These guys should be on TV, strike the iron when it is hot. All right, let's move on here. We talked about that for quite a bit. We had Hangman Adam Page versus Leo Roosh. I like to call him Leo Roosh, who apparently is now All Elite. He is with AEW, and he may be replacing Andrade on a regular basis, taking that spot away from Andrade. Who knows if Andrade is even going to be back at this point? So they traded blows right off the bat. They were chopping each other. Jose, the assistant, interfered. He grabbed Page's foot. Roosh capitalized on it, threw Page into a chair on the outside of the ring. While the referee was distracted, he was using the ringside cables as a weapon. And then after the commercial break, Paige started to make a comeback, hit a DVD, but Roosh kicked out. Jose, the assistant, once again grabbed the foot. He was definitely making his presence felt. Roosh hit a straight jacket pile driver, but Paige kicked out of it. Paige then recovered, made his comeback, and finally got the win with the buckshot lariat. Good match here with these guys. Private Party showed up afterwards, and they were going to hurt Adam Page, but then Jon Moxley showed up, and Moxley chased them off. Moxley got on the mic, said he's been waiting 3 years to get an opportunity to fight Adam Page. Their paths have finally crossed. And he said that between the two of them, they have beaten just about everybody in AEW except for each other. Moxie said on October 18th, a special Tuesday edition of Dynamite, there will be one last man standing in AEW. Not sure if that was a last man standing challenge. Moxie said he's going to break Paige's face. And when the bell rings, Moxie said he doesn't have goddamn respect for anything. He started to leave, but then Paige was like, well, you waited 3 years, so where are you going? We can do this right now. Moxley got back in the ring, but then said he's going to let Paige off the hook for now. And he warned Paige to watch his damn mouth. So good segment here. More build up for the world title match in 2 weeks. That should be a barn burner, as they say. World title match in Cincinnati, Jon Moxley territory. Backstage, we had Willow, who picked up a big win on this show. She wanted to challenge Jade Cargill, even though she lost twice to Jade. And I guess it's going to happen on Rampage. Will Willow be able to finally beat Jade Cargill and be the one in 28-1, whatever the number is for Jade? Will she end the undefeated streak? I'll be surprised, but anything can happen. We then had Luchasaurus in a very quick squash match against Fuego del Sol. And afterwards, Luchasaurus was going to continue the beatdown. Jungle Boy, however, made the save, had a steel chair. He hit Luchasaurus in the back. And then Jungle Boy got on the mic, said Luchasaurus was his best friend, but chose Christian, and that broke Jungle Boy's heart. Jungle Boy said now he is going to break Luchasaurus piece by piece, going to break every body part, just like Moxie's going to break Paige's face. Jungle Boy is going to break Luchasaurus. And Jungle Boy said, name the time and place. Christian got on the mic and had a response, said they're not going to have a match in Washington, D.C., the cesspool. Instead, it's going to be next week in Christian's hometown of Toronto. That'll be a fun one next week. Christian Cage in the corner of Luchasaurus in his hometown of Toronto as Luchasaurus faces Jungle Boy on next week's Dynamite. Then we had our main event of the evening, Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara going up against Bryan Danielson and Daniel Garcia. Jericho offered Garcia a handshake, and Garcia accepted the handshake, so we got more code of honor. Whoop-de-doo. Garcia got the best of Jericho for a bit. They traded chops. And then Sammy Guevara grabbed Garcia's foot, giving his team the upper hand. Whenever Guevara tagged in there, the crowd was booing him out of the building. Sounded like the X-Pac heat, not the, man, we think you're such a cool heel type of heat. And Guevara would do some cool things in the match, and every time he did something impressive, the crowd just chanted, "You still suck." And Jericho ended up getting into a hockey fight with Garcia. They traded more chops, and then Guevara tagged back in. Bryan and Garcia got on some dueling submissions, dueling elbow strikes, but then Guevara managed to make a comeback. Again, people were chanting, "You still suck." Garcia hit a pile driver to Guevara. Jericho broke up the pin, and then Danielson was suplexed by Jericho through the timekeeper's table. Guevara hit the go to hell to Garcia, then went for the shooting star press, but Garcia got his knees up. Garcia got the Dragon Slayer submission on. However, Chris Jericho was able to break that up by hitting Garcia with the Ring of Honor Championship, and then Sammy Guevara pinned Daniel Garcia. And this was a decision. I know you had the outside interference, but a lot of people not sympathizing with Sammy Guevara in this conflict with Andrade. Now, we were not there backstage. We don't know what happened, if Andrade was the aggressor in this. But according to TMZ, Sammy pushed Andrade. And Guevara ends up getting the pin in the Dynamite main event. Very interesting. Hamp Cano sent in a $9.99 super chat. Thank you for that, Hamp. Says, today in history, 1997, the first Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood saw the debut of Kane. Also that day, Brian Pillman is found dead in his hotel. 1999, Darren Drozdov is injured at a live event. Very sad about Brian Pillman. Also sad about Droz, the injury that paralyzed him and ended his wrestling career. And on a more positive note, the Hell in a Cell match, one of the best WWE pay-per-view matches of all time, one of the best debuts of all time with Kane. It's got to be Kane. Certainly a noteworthy day, October 5th. Dr. Dakota Scorpio sent in a $2 super chat. Says, Sammy went from beloved to despised in 3 years. It's been a rough 3 years for him because he's been busting his ass, yet the fans seem to resent him more and more. First strike against him was when those comments came out about him, the podcast that resurfaced from several years ago when he made that rape joke about Sasha Banks, and I think he got suspended from what I remember. Had to take like a sensitivity class or something. And then strike two was he proposed to his fiance, and then 3 months later, he's in a relationship with Ty Conti. Then you could say this is the third strike. Now Sammy Guevara getting in a backstage altercation with Andrade. Not sure if Sammy can ever be loved by the fans again at this point. Dylan sent in a $10 super chat. Thank you for that, Dylan. Very much appreciated. Says, do you think it's hypocritical for fans to complain about AEW making references that fans have to look up online to understand, while WWE is doing the same thing with the White Rabbit stuff? I don't really think it's the same thing. The White Rabbit stuff is not taking away from anything that's happening on Raw. That's the first thing. And second, their cryptic teases hyping up the return of a television character that pretty much the entire audience is familiar with. Very different from AEW bringing in wrestlers that yeah, they're well known to your diehard indie fans, but they're bringing in wrestlers that have no previous history of being on national television. Yet AEW often brings in these guys and assumes that everybody watching on television knows who they are. And my thought process is always, if you're writing a television show, you should assume that the audience knows nothing. If you have to explain it, explain it. Obviously, WWE, sometimes they go in the opposite direction where they show recap after recap that we don't really need. And I think they go in the opposite direction more times than not, where they baby you, like they have to explain every little thing and recap things a million times when I don't think it's necessary. I think there's a happy medium. You want to explain things, but you don't want to go too overboard with it. And I think maybe one criticism that I think is valid with AEW is that they expect fans to know who these independent wrestlers are, even though they've had no national television exposure. Jeff Meacham sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that, Jeff. Says, off topic but vital. Halloween ends in theater, or I guess that's home. I can't even see that emoji. Even with my glasses, I can't see what it is. I was thinking about going to the theater for it. I may. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do yet, because it is on Peacock, and it's tempting to just sit at home and watch it on television and not pay to sit in a theater. But at the same time, it is fun to actually watch a movie with an audience. But then COVID, so not really sure. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. I may just watch it on Peacock, but we'll see. Anyways, final thoughts. Oh yeah, and the whole Eddie Kingston thing too with Sammy Guevara, as Steve-O said. So it could be Sammy Guevara already had his 3 strikes. This might have been his 4th strike. So anyways, oh, the emoji is peacock. I mean, it looks like a little brown circle to me. That's how bad my vision is at this point with the emojis. I can see the laughing emoji, but I cannot make out the peacock emoji. Anyways, Dynamite was a very good show. I think under the circumstances, it was very solid. For being the 3-year anniversary show, I don't know if it was a complete home run, but I thought it was a very good episode of Dynamite. The wrestling was strong, and usually that's AEW's strong suit is the wrestling. So if you put those guys out there and let them do their thing, it's hard to have a bad show. I'm giving it a B+. Very strong, entertaining Dynamite. Was not one of my favorites, but it was still a very good show overall. And next week should be a lot of fun. The first Toronto show, and then 2 weeks we got the Cincinnati show. They got a couple good shows coming up, couple big ones, and then we got Full Gear. So things should start to pick up as we get closer to the next pay-per-view. I would recommend the show. I definitely think if you like the quality wrestling, this show did not disappoint. And the big talking segment with the Acclaimed, that was well done. Steve-O's like 6 strikes for Sammy Guevara. Yeah, could be at this point. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate your continued viewership and support of NoDQ.com. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Give it a like on social media. I would really appreciate that if you could just tell a friend about No DQ and just share a link to this video on social media. That makes a big difference, believe it or not. So anyways, guys, stay tuned. NoDQ.com will keep you updated on all of the backstage drama. The latest drama seems to be ongoing in AEW. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. And remember to say yes to NoDQ.com. I will see you all next time.